Hello people of the universe, welcome back to another episode of the Wellsy Weekly Podcast, the show where I talk about anything and everything. My name is John, aka Wellsy, and you are listening to episode 40. How are you all keeping entertained in this lockdown time period thing? Are you doing well? Have you gone a little bit insane? Personally, I'm doing a lot of drawing and get back into just creating loads of random ideas and stuff like that. I used to do it as a kid, like a bit of story writing and that kind of stuff. I'm kind of getting into the idea of creating more stories, just random stories. I'm not going to share them with anybody, but I thought it might be interesting to do. One thing I am a little bit sad about though, whilst being in this lockdown, is my snack drawer has finally run out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it, my snack drawer has run out. That means no more Bourneville, no more random bags of crisps. It's just disappointing, I've got nothing left. But, as I'm recording this, it is Easter and I've got an Easter egg. How amazing is that? Almost 21 and still getting an Easter egg. Brilliant, love it. So, my snack drawer has been replenished with chocolate. I love it. And it's really good to snack on something in these times where we're just inside constantly, or a lot of the day anyway. People can still go out for walks and stuff like that as long as they're not, interacting with people, catching up with your mates and stuff, keeping to yourselves, people in your house, and just go for a nice walk somewhere. That'd be nice. The weird thing about this whole lockdown is time, right? Because we're going to be in it for a long time. And speaking of time, that's what I want to talk about today. Specifically though, paradoxes. So, my question for you today is, what is your favourite paradox? Let me know down below in the comments, whether that's YouTube, Facebook or SoundCloud, all are welcome here. Now, just to explain why we're talking about paradoxes today, let me tell you a little story, right? So, recently, I've been binge watching the latest series of Doctor Who, the one with the female Doctor. I can't remember the actress's name, I feel really bad now. Just because somebody told me, it was a lot better than her first season. To be fair, it was, but I still didn't think it was one of the best series of Doctor Who. That's still David Tennant, series 4, 5? Whichever one Don Noble was in. That was a good series. That was good. Yeah, that was a good season, to be fair. So, yeah, it got me thinking, though, about all these different, time travel ideas and all these things called paradoxes. And it creates a lot of inconsistency within that TV show, but that's a story for another day. So like I mentioned before, paradoxes is what we're going to talk about today. But just to give you a quick idea of what a paradox actually is, it's basically a statement that contradicts itself despite having logical conclusions. In most cases, the statement is not true or false. An example of this would be the sentence, "This sentence is false." Now, if it's false, then it must be telling the truth because it said it was false. But if it's telling the truth, then it must logically be false. So you see how it kind of messes with your head a little bit, how it can be true and false at the time. And it creates this loop of just is it true, is it false? Well, if you go by the logic, it's true, but if you also go by the other bit of logic, it's false as well. And it just messes with your mind a bit. It's all mind-boggling, and I love this kind of stuff, right? I really do. It just racks my brain. It keeps me up all night thinking about it. It did last night, to be fair. And to be honest, I thought it was all just time-based stuff, so if we had the idea of time travel, it was all created paradoxes within that. But reading that statement of what a paradox actually is, something that just contradicts itself, basically paradoxes are a lot more common than people realise. And I was looking into this episode, giving examples. I thought it was just sciencey stuff, but it turns out it's in books and literature as well. One example of this is Animal Farm, right, by George Orwell. Great book, definitely recommend it if you haven't. It's a really good book. A little twisted and weird, but it's cool nonetheless. And there's a quote from there that I'm going to read you, and it goes a little something like this. "All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others." Now, the first part makes total sense, all animals are equal. It's talking about equality and whatnot between the animals. Great stuff. The second part is where it starts to become contradictory and becomes a bit of a paradox. Because the second part, "but some animals are more equal than others," means that equality cannot possibly occur. It cannot possibly make sense, because the first part said that all animals are equal, but the second part's saying that some are more equal than others, meaning some are higher than others. And I think that was George Orwell's intention, to be honest, to show that there's a flaw in communist ideology. Because that's what the whole book's about. It's like to reflect like the communist ideas and just like how it's all meant to be equal, but there are still some people in higher places who, basically run the country. So it's a bit flawed in that respect. And I think that's what he was trying to get across as a metaphor, but in doing so, he's created a paradox, which is really quite cool and interesting, in my personal opinion anyway. I'm running out of breath, so I do apologise. I'm just getting really excited. And these examples, there's plenty more in like literature and books and all this kind of stuff. I'd love to share a few more, but to be honest, I just don't have enough time. Like I said earlier, I always thought they were just time-related ones, but it's really interesting that there's more examples out there other than, the space and the physics and the timey-wimey stuff. So just a quick reminder for all you people out there, what is your favourite paradox? That is the question for today. Now this could be anything from literature, anything from Animal Farm, I think there's one in Hamlet, I think there's one in Romeo and Juliet, or it could be a time-based paradox, which is what I want to get onto next. So as I said earlier in the video, I thought it was all just time-related paradoxes and stuff, because that's what you see in most movies, books, TV, that kind of stuff, where it's just like all a bit sci-fi, mumbo-jumbo stuff. How like if you go back in time, you change something, it contradicts itself, or the timeline is messed up somewhere. I think that's really cool and interesting, right? To the idea of time travel anyway. I mean, practically it'd be almost impossible. Well, I guess it's not impossible, but that's another story for another day. And I'll give you some examples of time paradoxes, alright? Now the first one is a very popular one, it's called the grandfather paradox. This paradox is when you go back in time to kill your granddad, or just to like stop your grandparents ever getting together, but in doing so, you wouldn't exist, so how could you possibly kill your grandfather? It's a weird one, because if you kill your granddad, well basically then you don't become you don't exist because you were never born, so how could you possibly go back in time and kill your granddad? You're essentially in a loop of just like, well, if he's there, whether your granddad's there or not. It's very weird, it's a very weird one, it's very cool though. And I've come up with a few ideas to fix this one. One idea would be using multiple timelines, so basically if you kill your granddad, that basically splits off into a new timeline where he is no longer existing, but you've come from another timeline, so basically it supports the idea of a multiverse, the idea that every decision, every change that could possibly happen creates a new universe or a new timeline in which, events occur. Now, the next paradox I want to talk about is something called predestination, and it's a little complicated, so bear with me for a second, because it goes something a little like this. So, imagine something happens, like, I don't know, someone eats your sandwich at work. Very terrible thing to do, by the way, but we'll go with it. So, because somebody is eating your sandwich, you build a time machine to go back in time to try and stop the man or woman trying to eat your sandwich. Sacrilegious, by the way. Don't ever try it, because I will create a time machine and I will stop you. But by going to the past, you've caused events and things to happen which makes that person eat your sandwich to begin with. So, just to run through that again, somebody's just eaten my sandwich, I create a time machine to go back in time and try and stop them eating my sandwich. But because I've gone back in time, I've basically put the idea into their head of, ooh, I want a sandwich. So they've inevitably eaten my sandwich because of what I've done in the past. Told you it was a little bit complicated, so I do apologise. So basically, events that have happened in the present have led you to go to the past, which caused the events in the present. It's a very weird one, and you kind of like, it's like a predestination, as the name of the paradox suggests, because whatever you do in the past is already determined of what happens in your present and inevitably in the future. And it's a bit complicated, and it's all a bit weird, but it's really cool, I think. Again, it's a paradox that actually just boggles my mind, or just boggles a lot of people's minds, because it's hard to comprehend. But this is why I love paradoxes, because it sounds so ridiculous and insane and awesome. Like, do you not think how, like, logically it all makes sense? But then it can't possibly make sense. I just think that's really fascinating. That's just my opinion though, anyway. I can't get enough of paradoxes, I really can't though, and I could talk about them for days, right? But I know you guys can't because it is a lot to take in like 10-15 minutes. So I'll remind you that the question for today is, what is your favourite paradox, whether that is from literature or time travel or anything in between really, any statement that contradicts itself. Let me know down below in the comments if you've got a thought or an opinion. I hope that's given you something to think about. I hope it's not melted your brains too much. I know it can be a little confusing at times, but thank you all for listening to today's podcast. I hope you've enjoyed what I've been saying, because I really enjoyed it as well. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy a cuppa.